U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo declared, I need more money. I need more money to do what? To sanction China, to block China from the latest and the best technologies that the U.S. have. He said, we cannot let China get these chips, period. We have to deny them our most cutting-edge technology. Now, to do that, she said she needs more money. She runs it on a budget of $200 million. And she said that's just a few jet fighters will cover that. So in order to have real control over leading-edge technology from the U.S. being not exported to China, she needs more money. Now this is really quite interesting. On the one hand, after the two heads of state met in San Francisco, there's talk about improving the relations in terms of trade, in terms of commerce, in terms of addressing global issues like environment, like peace. All of a sudden, she announces, we're going to blockade China from all our technology. We cannot allow this to go to China in any way. And in fact, there were entrepreneurs in the audience who are in the chips business who are obviously uncomfortable and unhappy to hear what she's saying. And she was actually not explicit, but she was certainly talking about NVIDIA, for example, which is designing chips which will actually be able to circumvent the restrictions, the U.S. Commerce Department on chip exports that can still be sold and shipped to China. So she talks about, I know it's not good for your profitability, but this is more important in the longer term. This is more strategic. I think there are a couple of things here. The first thing is that there is obvious conflict between the government and companies who are in the chip business in terms of whether or not they're allowed to continue to engage Chinese customers. The government seems to be taking a very hard line, and the companies are not very happy, and they're looking at ways of circumventing these very hard lines. We'll see what happens, because ultimately you can't block China from advancing in technology. You don't sell the chips, the Chinese will make it themselves. They've already demonstrated their ability to do so. Very smart scientists and very smart engineers, and very hardworking as well. And they are going to, as they already have in a number of sectors, surpass the U.S. You can try and block it here and there, but you can't block every sector, every field, forever. So this is really not very strategic. It's all temporary. I think this is something that has to be taken into account by the decision makers, the policy formulators in the U.S. It's a waste of money to try to block it because it won't work, it won't happen. What's the situation with Chinese chip manufacturing? Well, we now know that they're making 7nm chips already based on domestic technology and domestic IP. Are they going to get down to 5 or 3 nanometers anytime soon? Hard to say. But in my view, I think it's not necessary to go down to 5 and 3. For example, for most consumer products, even cell phones, 7 nanometers is more than sufficient. How small a chip do you need to put into a car, right? How small a chip do you need to put into a refrigerator, right? So I think in terms of consumer products, aside from cell phones, 28 nanometers is more than enough. So all of this, I think, is more hype than real, especially in the military side. Some would argue that you need more precise, thinner, and lower power consumption for military purposes. I say no, because for military purposes, you actually want something that's sturdy. You don't care if it's a little bit bigger. You want it that can run all kinds of roads. You want stuff that would not shake and go out of business. You want stuff that doesn't get shocked by firing of a cannon or shocks coming from explosions. You can't do that with 3 nanometers, 5 nanometers. you need it at 56 nanometers, I think. So really, I think overall there's more hype than necessary. And whatever the case, it's a big argument over nothing because China has already gotten the capacity to produce the type of chips which most people would ever find that they need in their lifetime. NVIDIA designed a chip for China is actually for artificial intelligence. It is the hottest subject nowadays in the whole tech sector, and U.S. government, what they would like to do is for China not to be able to process artificial intelligence data as quickly as the U.S., whereas the U.S. can use the latest version of the chips. NVIDIA is now designing a chip that is just below that top grade that can actually be sold to China based on the language of the restrictions. And they can circumvent that. That certainly makes Raimondo unhappy. I think that makes a lot of the hardliners unhappy. But hey, NVIDIA needs to do business. It's a company. It's trying to make profit. It's trying to hold on to market share. You know, you can't tell them, no, you can't do it. You can't do business. You can throw away your biggest customer. I don't think that would all go very well for the business side of chips. I think ultimately, NVIDIA or anybody else, or Qualcomm and Microsoft and so on and so forth, they're out to do business. And if they find that China is advancing so rapidly, but they're forced to give up the market, they'll certainly be unhappy. But I think these views, which last year was not even taken into account whatsoever by the U.S. government, is increasingly being taken into account, or at least being offered a place to be heard. This is a change in China-U.S. relations, because as recent as a year ago, you basically couldn't even hear enterprises or big companies talking about how they have to protect their market share, they have to conduct business, they have to make profits, they have to keep going with the Chinese market. So a year ago, you can't even hear that. At least now it's being talked about. And now it's not actually being, if not satisfactorily, but at least being addressed by U.S. senior officials.